Good morning everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 4th of July and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So we're on episode 362, Phil, but
get our dates.
Yeah,
we got our dates right this week, right. I think.
And we couldn't get the date wrong this week because it's 4th of July and it's Independence Day in the UK, isn't it? Because pubs, restaurants, hairdressers are all reopening today.
Yeah. God forbid. We've got some stories on that in a bit, haven't we, with talking about the Leicester news this week. But yeah, at least we got the dates right, because I think I put the 13th of June on the title and talked about the 20th of June or something in the introduction there. So it is the 4th of July. You are listening on the 4th of July, and here we go. So it's, like I say, it's episode 362, Independence Day. Lots of other businesses now opening and trying to put in their social distancing, whether that's 2 meters or 1 meter, and you do feel sorry for some of these operators, but at least they can get back into some sort of business. But got a few headlines this week to get through and a great interview at the end to share with people, don't we?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Showrooms are now open across the UK, so it's the first time since back in March on the podcast where we've been able to say that showrooms are open across the UK, but there's still a bit of confusion over Leicester. So we'll come to that in the show. And yes, you're right. So if you are stuck in traffic today, which is quite likely if you're on the roads, because there's talk of millions of cars, millions of journeys being made today, then do stay tuned for our interview with Clive Brook, who is the owner-driver of Clive Brook Volvo, based in Bradford and Huddersfield, because it's a cracking interview. Clive takes us through what the lockdown meant for the business, the reopening in June, and he's actually had a very, very successful June. So he takes us through that, and also his hopes for the. And Clive's got plenty to say, and it's a good interview, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, he's fairly open and shares some of his sort of background and why he got into the business, etc. And obviously talks quite openly about the dark days in April of what they went through. But he does, like you say, he shares some of the activity that they've been seeing through the business since the restriction lift. So again, tune in, stay tuned. If you've not listened to it already this week, then do stay tuned to the end there. But we have got some good headlines this week, haven't we? With sort of activity again across the market, MOTs and things like this.
Yeah, so headlines this week include new car buyers expecting bigger discounts because of the COVID-19 crisis, and that they'll use that as leverage. MOT tests have been reintroduced from the 1st of August, but not everyone's happy about that. We've got, as we said earlier, confusion over Leicester and whether car dealerships are affected by the shutdown. The COVID-19 crisis prompts possible redundancies at HR Owen. Lookers shares suspended as annual results are delayed. And finally, we've got a good one this week. It's
one,
it is. It's it's one of those sort of tech type stories involving BMW and what can be turned on and off in terms of optional extras when vehicles pass into the used car market.
So it's we've finished June now. We're waiting for the June new car registrations, since the dealerships opened, particularly in England on the 1st of June. We know Wales and Scotland didn't open on that date. So again, the indications are that the new car figures are I think figures are going to be sort of minus 35, between 35 and 40% down are the indications, but we'll wait for the SMMT to announce the exact numbers. But we have had sight of some of the European performances and a little bit wider. We haven't had Germany yet as we are recording, but Sweden down 22%. Italy down 23%, Switzerland down 13%, Belgium only down 1.8%, and actually France increased. So France being one of the sort of the top 5 within the European market, registered 233,800 cars in June. So it's a very quick, swift recovery and actually an increase on their performance last year. So, the UK last year did 223,000, and there's indications that we won't quite get to the 150,000 this year, but a lot of pre-reg activity, I think, going on in the last 24 hours of the month. There was some frustrated administrators across the network as a lot of last minute deals were being done, and obviously wise people are still on furlough as well. That didn't help, but fantastic result there for France. I mean, straight back up there. Year on year.
Yes. I mean, that's an amazing turnaround for France. So we'll cover the UK figures next week. They're out on Monday. So the first headline this week is from Car Dealer, and it's nearly 71% of new car buyers expect bigger discounts because of coronavirus. Interesting use of the word nearly there. So it's either 70 or 71% of new car buyers, but this is based on some research that What Car have done for it, some What Car Insight reports, and it's saying that 71% of new car buyers expect to haggle for a bigger discount because of the pandemic, and their research covered 6,100 in-market buyers, and it's kind of saying that yes, buyers will use this as leverage because that they realise that factories have been closed for the last 2 or 3 months, and the OEMs and dealers need to sell new cars, and they need to get them out there, and that does give them a certain amount of leverage. And also interesting on the used buyer front, so the used buyers it spoke to, 58% said they'll do exactly the same, because there's a sort of growing realization amongst buyers that prices have hardened there. So what did you make of this one?
Yeah, I think in many ways good luck with some of it. I think obviously, we spoke about it a couple of times, haven't we, on the podcast around the initiatives and incentives and sort of the what's happening with the government to stimulate that new car market. And as David Peel from Peugeot clearly said, he wants to just get on with their incentives. And I think the feedback at the minute is there was a lot of offers on in the market for new cars, particularly for new cars from the manufacturers. They're aware that they need to get the market moving. They're aware that they need attractive deals and support for the consumers to get them back into the showrooms and get those orders coming through. How much more leverage the consumer might have will be an interesting one. As you just said there, reports are that there's been some active pre-reg activity in the last sort of 24 hours of June. That will then obviously by default create some attractive offers on some pre-reg nearly new product. But again, you're in this position now, and Mike Jones from ASE did allude to it, that if you want in a spec car, an individually spec car, then you may have a long wait, and you may actually be waiting into 2021 before you get that car. So a lot of the offers are on physical stock that is either on the route to the UK or actually in the UK already in either a compound or at the dealer. Now, used cars, interesting you say that on used cars. I mean, the figures have come out this week from Kappa HPI, and the 3-year 60 mark has gone up, and so has the 5-year and sort of 8 and 10-year-old vehicles have all gone up in value. Nearly new has dropped slightly, but the values are holding very strong. Performance is very strong out there. So there's even reports that some of the retail prices may have to go up on the back of the strength of some of the wholesale prices that are being seen. So again, the activity seems to be there, but it is going to be based on each individual car. There'll be businesses that will need to move some stock, and they may have a good deal for the consumer on that used car. But again, some businesses will look at it to say that we're quite happy with the price. We know we've got demand for that product, and they'll hold firm on the price. So I think there's a lot to be seen. But again, you referred to it right at the start of the show. The Clive Brook interview, in terms of when he talks through some of their performance for June, is some great pent up demand out there at the minute, isn't there, for the first month of the restriction lift.
My take on this is that, one of the stats that interested me was 73% of respondents said they won't buy unless they're offered a deal. Now, there's one thing a potential buyer responding to a questionnaire. There's a totally different matter when that buyer is on the forecourt,
yes,
talking about the car that they want to buy. Because if they're in the market for a car, they've planned for it, they've budgeted it, and will they be so hard line? Will they play hardball on a deal? I don't think so. If they realise that there's demand for these cars, then maybe they will sacrifice a deal.
Yeah, and it's back to the sales process that the dealers are operating within, and things like this. Making sure that the consumer feels that they're getting looked after and they're getting a good deal that's relevant for them. And I think, like you say, there's one thing answering a survey or questionnaire in a way, and actually, if you're in the market for the car, you might expect a bit of a deal. What that deal may look like and what the expectations are around that, who knows? It's it doesn't really get into that level of detail, but we'll wait and see. But I think everybody's eagerly waiting to see what the used car performance figures are going to look like for this sort of first half of the year, pre-COVID, yes, and post-COVID, and see what the used car transaction figures look like at the end of it. But we'll see. But hopefully, or maybe not, the next story may help or not help with the latest, again, sticking with car dealer, and the government have, from the 1st of August, they have cancelled the 6-month extension to MOTs, and I think it's been welcomed news, but also challenged why it's being put off to the 1st of August. Why not just cancel it immediately? Because it's only relevant when you know that your car needs an MOT. So if your car isn't due for an MOT until next week, it's only at that point that the extension would matter. So it makes, I can understand the challenge on this as to why not just cancel it. And I've had my car recently MOT'd, and quite interesting, I booked it in for an MOT and end of warranty service and checkup, and they asked if I wanted to take advantage of the 6-month extension. I won't name dealers.
Interesting.
Which I thought, I'm not sure that's what you should be doing, really.
No.
That you're getting revenue from this, you're getting income from this. Why give me the offer? But in one way, is it doing the right thing for consumers, giving me the opportunity to defer for 6 months, of which I didn't. I just wanted to get it MOT'd. But yeah, it's an interesting one. What's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I would question the delay, because it could have been introduced on the 1st of July rather than delaying it until the 1st of August. So it does mean that anyone due an MOT in July can actually defer it for 6 months, and then it becomes mandatory from the 1st of August. And this is very much the line taken by Stuart James, who's the chairman of the Independent Garage Association, because in this particular story, he says this additional a month will allow at least 1 million unroadworthy cars to remain on the road for an additional 6 months, as well as the 1.6 million dangerous vehicles that have not already had their MOT extended. So he's looking at the volume of cars on the road that possibly don't need to be on the road without MOTs. Yeah. And I do agree with him. I think the government was in a position there to reintroduce it on the 1st of July, and they could still have given a fortnight's notice for people to get themselves sorted out and their cars booked in. But it is what it is. So it's mandatory from 1st of August.
It's just another reason that giving the consumers, deferment of not getting things done when they should have them done. And that revenue into it, in terms of the businesses are all open now across the UK, and they're all wanting income, and they want consumers on their side through the door. So it seems a bit silly not to do that, but I agree with that one. And Leicester, we mentioned Leicester right at the start here. So very, I think we were actually unclear with this one. I mean, we're heading over to AM online, and it's a good in-depth story there from AM, and Leicester car dealers fear COVID-19 second wave could unravel recovery effort. And you can understand this, but actually you read through it, and it's not really clear of whether who should be open. Can they open? Can they not open? Can they just operate the click and collect? Is it relevant to the 1st of June? Is it relevant to the 15th of June? It's very unclear for guidance, isn't it, on this one?
It is very unclear, and apologies and commiserations to any dealers in Leicester who are listening to this today who might be open or might be closed. But I mean, my understanding of this story is that dealers are allowed to remain open because they were in that first wave of non-essential retail businesses which were allowed to reopen from the 1st of June. Also, from this story, it seems to indicate that these rules only apply to non-essential retail businesses and indeed schools that reopened from the 15th of June. But having said that, Leicester is a major city for car retailers. It is, after all, the home of Sytner Group. Sytner have a huge presence in the city with Audi, BMW, Mini, Porsche, Bentley and Lamborghini franchises. It's also the home of Sturgis Motor Group, who have a number of outlets across the city. So this confusion is unhelpful. And even if the sites are open, what can residents do? Because residents will assume that they're closed. Hopefully they'll get in touch online or over the phone. But it's unhelpful. More clarity was definitely needed on this one.
And you do hear reports that you've got one dealership that's open, 100 yards away you've got a dealership that's closed.
Yeah,
because of the border control on this, and other dealerships are reporting that they're just going to continue operating until somebody tells them they need to shut down, and others that have said they've straight away, because they feel that they're within that postcode territory, they've reverted back to the click and collect process and not fully open. So again, you've got Sturgis there talking about that they're awaiting clarification, but having read the guidance applies to retail businesses opened on the June the 15th, that they're hopeful that car retail sites that opened on the 1st of June will be okay. And kind of questions that if you've got a dealership that opened on the 1st of June or one that opened on the 15th of June, what's the difference between the two of those operations as to who can open and who can't open? But again, I think the on the Vehicle Remarketing Association AGM this week, there was a couple of speakers on there, and one of them was Dr. Justine Varney, and he's the director at Birmingham City Council, and he was quite clear that he's expecting more second waves and possibly third waves of COVID. And I suppose you question this, whether is it better for the government to have 60, 70, 80% of the UK open and operating and 20% closed through second and third wave lockdowns? It's we're in for a rocky ride with this one, aren't we, going forward?
Yeah, we're not out of the woods on this. So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available online at motortraderadio.com and by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, and SoundCloud. So staying with COVID-19 for the next story, which is from AM, and the headline is COVID-19 crisis prompts redundancies at luxury car retailer HR Owen. So this story is it is kind of a mixture, this story, because it is based on a statement put out by HR Owen, and it looks as though AM have been talking to someone possibly at HR Owen who is hearing things on the ground. So the story says HR Owen has said that it is making a limited number of redundancies in response to the market challenges faced as a result of the crisis. Now, I guess where the story hinges is on the scale of the redundancies. Yeah. Now, HR Owen make it quite clear in their statements that it's confined to a limited number of part-time workers, contracts workers, and early retirements. So we don't know the numbers, but within the story, it has been claimed that it could be up to 25% of its 500-strong workforce, which I don't think is in alignment with what HR Owen are saying. Yeah. But it does follow on from, we covered redundancies at Lookers, were announced a couple of weeks ago. Cambria recently confirmed that they will be making a number of redundancies. And, this is indicative of what's happening as we come out of the lockdown.
Yeah, and it's not, we know it's not confined to the automotive sector. All week we've seen headlines, haven't we, from various other sectors, aerospace and etc. There's all sorts going on. We know that. And as you cite there with Cambria, and Mark Lavery did sort of cite fairly early on that they're expecting probably not, that the sector will see a reduction of 20 to 30% of their employee workforce across the whole of the network. So again, I thought it's not sort of unexpected. We are expecting an increase. I think the government's expecting this increase in unemployment. A lot of the challenges to the government around the stimulus and things has been focused on to ease this acceleration of unemployment. As we sort of come out with this, I think there's been news this week that in a V-shaped recovery that's been challenged, that actually, how can it be a V-shaped recovery when we're already sort of 3 months down the line and still not out of it yet? So, there's a lot going on in there, but this is a case of resource requirement and survival in many ways, and to make sure that they are protecting cash flow and protecting the business where they can. And it's a difficult one, but I think we are going to see quite a bit more of this, aren't we, as we move through time and we start to see some of these headlines come out. But again, it's AM have got that from somebody within HR Owen, but HR Owen have denied that figure to be accurate. So again, we'll wait to see what does come from this.
Yeah, now next headline is from Motor Trader, and it's Lookers shares suspended as annual results are delayed. This got a lot of coverage in across the media over the course of the week. So Lookers listings on the London Stock Exchange were suspended on 30th of June as it failed to meet a deadline to publish its 2019 accounts. Now, that deadline was imposed by the FCA under its disclosure guidance and transparency rules, and Lookers said it will request a restoration of its listing on publication of its results, which it wants to do, it says, as early as possible. But Lookers is taking a £19 million hit on its accounts to compensate for overstated profitability in recent years. And this is a story we've been following closely over the months, and this is the latest instalment, but by no means the final part.
Yeah, and I say it's a shame, that the shares have been suspended. There's a lot going on in the Lookers, and the chairman and CEO, Mark Rayburn, has been re-elected at their AGM this week, where these figures were announced. And there's a lot going on in there. I mean, it's a shame that they've had to suspend those shares, but it was imminent that was going to happen, and that 19 million does include the 4 million that they previously forecast that was going to hit. So hopefully this is it, and they can work their way around this and just get back on some kind of trading again and get the shares back on again. But yeah, tough times for Lookers at the minute, isn't it? I think you do feel for everybody within the Lookers organisation for everything that they are going through.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. And in the meantime, an investigation by Grant Thornton, which is supported by the internal team there, is ongoing.
Yeah. So we've got, as you said right at the start of the show, we've got an interesting and finally this week, and it's, interesting in many ways because it does show the evolution of the automotive sector and the capabilities going forward. And this is a story that, again, car dealer with James Baggett there, and BMW dealers will be able to turn on optional extras and off again on used cars at any time. And we were talking about this before we started recording, and this is great news for BMW, isn't it, in terms of what the capabilities are that this gives them?
It is, yeah. Now, this is all part of BMW Connected Drive, so it's really the whole connectivity issue. And evidently, it appears that new BMWs rolling off production lines are fitted with all sorts of optional extras that can be switched on or off electronically by the dealer, according to how initially the new car customer specs the car. So if they don't spec everything, it's actually on the car, but it's sort of in a limbo state, which can be turned on at any stage in the future. So that new car buyer could actually decide that, yes, they do want the optional extra cruise control. So the dealer will activate it, obviously, for a charge. But that will roll over into the used car market. So that dealer selling that model on their used car forecourt can actually reset to factory settings, and a potential buyer can then spec what they want, which this has never happened before. And as a sort of future trend, this is fascinating because you can guarantee this will be rolled out by other OEMs.
Yeah, and there's been speculation of this kind of thing years ago, that this, even things like the brake horsepower, you can switch on to have upgraded BHP, and there's been early speculation that actually the owner of the vehicle can have things switched on and off throughout their personal use of that vehicle. So they may want that they may want an increase in brake horsepower for a particular period of time. I'm not talking for my quick trip down the A1 per se, but there is this capability now through this connectivity that actually, when that consumer wants to increase the BHP, or as you say, activate the cruise for a period of time, or whatever, for whatever reasons, have various different option extras on, then they can switch them on and switch them off again, and pay a subscription for that period of usage. But the technology is there on the car from factory. And like you say, when you start moving this into the used car market, that actually that used car operated buyer can pay for additional items that are already on the car but that may not have previously been in use. I mean, the capabilities for this are endless, aren't they, going forward?
They are definitely, and it does make you wonder how much leverage, how much extra leverage BMW dealers will have on the used car market than independents selling the same model, because in theory, with block exemption, the independents will have access to that technology, but how readily will BMW be releasing that access and the codes and whatever? Whereas on a BMW used car forecourt, that car becomes a very attractive proposition, because it can be specced up.
Yeah, and I don't want to the doom and gloom on some of this, but I suppose, does it then open up the dark market with this kind of thing? We know that the mileage correction is still an issue in the market, with laptops accessing the mileage on vehicles such as BMWs and others. You just hope that this has always been the question, hasn't it? I mean, we've spoke about it numerous times on the podcast and personally, that you move into this world of connectivity through technology and connectivity, and unfortunately there's always the unscrupulous ones out there that look to take advantage of
Yes.
these things. But it's fantastic. You can see the way these things are moving forward and giving that capability of these optional extras for both the new car buyer and the used car buyer with these things moving forward. And it does make you question that the efficiency of the productivity from someone like BMW, because then they're producing that one car that has a selection of optional extras on, whether the customer's ordered it or not, that it can be just remotely switched on and off. So they don't have to build different variants of the same model of vehicle based on individual preferences to optional extras.
Yeah, I thought about this, and I'm assuming that the bean counters at BMW would have worked out that it was cheaper to have all these extra elements already on the car than not.
Yeah.
And if there's an opportunity to upsell at the end, then they're making incremental money out of it. So it would have been signed off by the bean counters, I suspect.
It would be. But I mean, that's it for this week. There's some lots and lots of headlines. I mean, it's every week it's becomes an increasing challenge, doesn't it, to find the headlines for the show. But as always, do head over to each of the platforms that we've mentioned there, with AM and Motor Trader and Car Dealer Mag and Auto Retail and all the others that we not necessarily mentioned on this week's podcast, but lots of stuff coming out there, lots of activity, lots of news stories, and these guys are all doing a fantastic job to keep everybody updated as information breaks, and they're getting it out, particularly more now that you're not waiting for a print copy to come through your door. It is all online in the digital form now, isn't it, more than ever?
Yep, and as you say, that's it for this week. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with Group. Do stay tuned for our chat with Clive Brook, owner-manager of Clive Brook Volvo in Bradford and Huddersfield. It's a wide-ranging interview, and Clive takes us through his business's lockdown experience, his record-breaking June performance, and also his hopes for the future. And interestingly, he does reintroduce the F word into the podcast, which is fun. He does make the point that he's in this business because it's fun. We all love cars. We do enjoy this business, despite what's being thrown at us at the moment. So do stay tuned for that, and do join Phil and I again next weekend, and look out for the latest in our series of special interviews with industry leaders and analysts. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him. Hello and welcome to me, Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson to this special Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. So again, many thanks for joining us in this latest in our series of special interviews themed around sharing best practices as car retailers manage their way through the COVID-19 crisis. Previous interviews with people such as Darren Edwards from Sittner's Group, Virtue Motors, Robert Forrester, Marshall Motors, Dash Gupta, and many more are still available to stream online from Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and motortraderadio.com.
For this episode, we're delighted to welcome to the show Clive Brook, Managing Director of Clive Brook Volvo, formed in 2001 and representing the Swedish brand in Bradford and Huddersfield. So welcome to the show, Clive.
Welcome to you too, and thank you for inviting me. I feel honoured after the list of names you've just called out.
No, you're more than welcome. You're in good company. So, Clive, with the business now reopened for a full month, we've obviously got lots to talk about. But can we perhaps start with just a little bit on your background, as your story is particularly interesting, as you've been associated with Volvo all your working life as both an employee and now owner of the Volvo Group. And I also understand it was at your Huddersfield site where you actually first started your career back in 1982. So can you take us through your journey with Volvo?
Yes, it does. It does seem a long time ago, but I was very lucky actually to be sort of taken under the wing of an apprenticeship scheme with Olaf Olssons, who were the Volvo dealers in Huddersfield at the time. I'd applied for a job really just to see me through the summer, and Olaf sort of saw something in me perhaps that my teachers hadn't seen throughout my education, and so yeah, that's where it started. So I was an apprentice technician, but I also had opportunity to have experience throughout the whole business. And yes, it was, and I think it was those probably early days where I saw the owner of the business in his, in his nice suit and his fancy car, and thought, there must be an easier way to earn a living than just on the spanners. But I had that. I still have that view today. I still remember seeing him and thinking, that's where I'd like to be one day.
And you worked your way up through the ranks on the sales side. And am I right in thinking you worked for Harrods Group, and you actually that's where your business started?
Yes, I mean I worked for Janssens, who it was owned by Jan Fletcher back in the sort of mid-80s. They bought the Volvo business in Huddersfield that I worked for at the time, I was into sales and sort of fairly quickly and quite young as a sales manager. We in fact we had both Saab and Volvo at the time, and yes, and I think Volvo were going through a sort of a territory reorganisation in the early 90s, and I got opportunity to go and work for the Harrods Group, who I think at that time had one, possibly two Volvo dealerships, and I spent many happy years with them. And then I think it was towards the perhaps back end of my time with them, I think I was probably as frustrating to them as they were to me, and I think weren't particularly going that well at the time, particularly within the Volvo side of the business of which I was responsible. And I took the opportunity to ask if they wanted to sell one, not expecting them to do that, and that started my journey with buying the Bradford business.
Yeah, and so you launched your business in which year?
It was two. I think we did all the sort of hard work at the back end of 2007, and we got going January 2008. Right. And I think it'd be incredibly hard to probably do what I did then today. I got the backing of Volvo and Ford Credit, who were around at the time, and they got something. Then we quickly got into a recession, which was something that wasn't particularly within my business plan. So I think the business was quickly into a sort of survival rather than anything else. And I think we learned a lot from that. Which has certainly helped us over the last few months as well.
I mean, what a time to start a business on your own. I mean, I suppose it's as good a time as any, isn't it? If you can get through the 2007, 2008 recovery time period, then I suppose a lot of learnings to be had from that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a scrappy scheme that definitely helped, and I think Volvo had the right product at the right time with certainly with the C30, which was sort of helped an awful lot at those times. But ensuring we had a low cost base as well, and we did. That certainly helped us at the start. But yes, it's from selling. I think the year before I took over, I think the Volvos were selling about just over 120 cars. In fact, it's almost the same as we sold in 1 month last month. So, certainly the town has seen certainly an increase in the sale of Volvos, that's for sure.
So, I mean, clearly there's a passion there for Volvo and for your experience, and in terms of the brand has experienced some challenging times in the period to the pre-acquisition by Geely. And was there ever a time when you sort of wish you'd had a different brand, a logo above your door and cars in your forecourt, or is it in terms of the new product now with the in the shape of the XC90, XC60, XC40, that the brand has obviously changed its proposition. I mean, you've just mentioned the C30 there and the cars of old, and what's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the current range of cars are fantastic. I mean, they are the key factor for the increase in volumes that we've had. The people want a Volvo. I mean, that's very different to the we'll talk about when I started the business. I think people were happy to have a Volvo, but now certainly with XC40 particularly, people really want one. So there's that helps enormously. But I think Volvo, again, I suppose relative to the time, it has always been a sort of understated product in many respects, and that has helped. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I've been so busy I've sometimes not put my head up necessarily to look at we've been happy with the brand that we've had, and yes, it could have been a very different story in terms of where Volvo are going with Ford and almost with Renault at one stage. So the investments that have been made have certainly paid off in terms of the product that we see today.
And Clive, moving on, like dealers around the UK, you closed your doors on the 23rd of March. Can you talk us through what the lockdown actually meant to your business? And in terms of, were you able to fulfill new car orders? Did after sales remain open? And also, how did the furlough scheme help you as a business?
Yeah, well, we had the option of keeping the workshops open. I took the decision at the time to close the business as a whole. I didn't feel that we could work safely together. We had a few days of trying social distancing, and we were not very good at it. So I think that was probably a key factor. They were very dark days. There is no doubt about it. It's as an owner driver, it was really not sure what was ahead of us. So Yes, of course, the furlough scheme helped enormously. In fact, everybody went onto the furlough scheme pretty much straight away. But yeah, I think those days, I really don't want to think too much about them. Very emotional, but we saw very quickly, in terms of the sort of online and calls that were coming into the business, could have been rerouted and answer messages taken, but we saw very quickly that there was a market. And so in terms of getting back to work, once the sort of 3 weeks, and I think we sort of went on the sort of almost the minimum amount of time, we got our workshops back open, and there was a timely recall as well. Volvo had put out a recall which customers were keen to they had nothing else to do, did they? So they were keen to get the car sorted out, and we did see in those early days, it was all key workers and essential car users. Well, all of a sudden, everybody became a key worker or essential user. So yes, I think we were delighted by customer response, and it did make. So we were back into sales fairly quickly because we've got a G-Forces and CodeWeaver set up, so we've got a full end-to-end solution in terms of customers being able to reserve online and even buy online. So very, very timely. We were seeing customers paying deposits for cars, reserving cars, not knowing when they were going to be able to take delivery of them. But we soon overcame that with click and collect, and I think we managed it very, very well. But there were some people who were happy to order cars and just sit and wait.
So, talking about Volvo, then, we've had a Volvo on with Christian, who I know you know very well. We're very close to his dealer network, but being as politically correct as you possibly can on a podcast, Clive, in terms of how supportive was Volvo during the lockdown period, because it was difficult because the lockdown period affected Volvo themselves as well as not just the UK but globally, as well as the dealer network. And how was that between yourself, the dealer network, and Volvo throughout that lockdown period, which is, like you say, dark days and tough for everybody?
Yeah, I thought the communication was extremely good. I think that Christian and Matt and James held sort of weekly webinars, but they were also on the phone. And at the end of the day, it's dark days for them because they simply did not have a network, and I think you could sense the frustration. But I think there was a number of dealers that were very proactive, certainly including ourselves. Certainly from a personal point of view, I didn't see there was any alternative. And at the end of the day, it was customer led, but I think they did an excellent job. I think they've done an excellent job. Certainly in terms of removing targets and being supportive in terms of dealer payments, and I think we've all learnt a lot. I think I suppose what we're seeing now is the fact that I think a lot of lessons are learned. I think there's some friendships. I think there's probably greater understanding of everybody's role in getting cars to market. And so yeah, I hope I've answered your question. It was fantastic to see Christian come up to see us as well. That was a massive boost to my staff, because it says a lot in terms of what Volvo think about what we've achieved.
Now, Clive, as we've said, you reopened your doors a month ago now, and you've actually completed a record-breaking June in terms of new car sales with around 120 units sold, and also labour sales, and you've also sold over 70 used cars. Can you take us through how the month actually panned out for the business, and also what it meant in terms of your overhead absorption?
Yeah, I think certainly officially reopening the showrooms was a much easier process for us, because obviously we, as mentioned earlier, we've been online anyway. I mean, both my showrooms had been giant service receptions for the previous month, so in some respects it was a question of just altering a few signs, and in terms of customer traffic flow. I mean, one of the things that we did get right from the start is that we turned our showrooms into a more of a VIP look, rather than a crime scene. And I think the crime, and I can understand,
Yes.
we've all, found, the use of sort of tape and things to direct customers, but I think we let pretty on. We had to maintain a pleasurable ownership and buying experience, and we definitely achieved that. Certainly with our friends at Rhino, because we ran a promotion. I mean, difficult times for that organisation as well, but we ran a promotion together, which was incredibly successful in terms of and really helped our relaunch at the beginning of June, because we'd run by appointment event the previous week or so before. So I suppose to answer your question, we built up a fair amount of. We did quite a lot of business in May anyway. We did have a lot of used car stock, which I'll come on to, or trade stock that we couldn't shift in May because there was no real market for it.
Yeah.
But certainly in terms of reopening, was fairly easy for us. Yes, we had managed to deliver about 40 new cars in May, in terms of customer orders that we couldn't supply at the back end of March.
Yeah.
So we were so what where our success was that we've had a gradual reopening. So every day has been an education. Certainly in terms of absolutely amazing attitude from everybody that's been unfurloughed and come back, and everybody that's been unfurloughed and come back has been through an education process, because obviously in terms of training, but their cooperation and creative, because everybody has to be creative and take responsibility, because from a social distancing point of view, it's put a lot of restrictions on us. So one of the things that we did do was we made sure that we weren't totally over the top in terms of by appointment. We've seen almost on the same basis of turning a showroom into a crime scene. If you were not careful, you're turning customers away by... and I think we've managed this incredibly well. I mean, I think it is safe to say that our overall showroom visits are probably down about 50%, where we maybe see half a dozen customers a day, it's 2 or 3, but they are welcomed. We manage the process really well. We've done business because the customers may not necessarily have primarily wanted our product, but we've made the sales process really easy for them. So, we mustn't lose sight of that. But yes, I think we haven't had an issue with stock. I mean, certainly the marketing and the business that we did in May generated us quite a lot of our own parts exchanges. We only sell Volvo, so from a trade perspective, which obviously which we're talking about dealer auction, but has been a phenomenal success, and I think obviously that's well discussed in the industry at the moment. But we have hugely benefited from our trade operation. So, and then as you said, in terms of low overheads, I mean, we still have suppliers who've given us some excellent terms, and obviously we've taken advantage of local council reductions in rates, etc. So, and I suppose that. I mean, sadly, I still have a number of staff that are still furloughed because we just simply don't have room. But your point in terms of absorption, we have managed incredible levels of productivity and efficiency because customers have been arriving on time and doing as they're told, and that has been not that may change, and we're probably seeing that change slowly. But having a car, being able to work on a car straight away, being able to find that car in the car park, and they're really, really basic things. But I can't emphasise enough in terms of some real champions in my team. I have got a number of long-serving members of staff. We do pride ourselves on being Volvo experts, and but seeing some leadership qualities from people perhaps that I'd not before, it's really brought out some exceptional performances, and some people who desperately need a holiday. I know they can't. There's nowhere to go at the moment. Hopefully soon. So yeah. Hopefully, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I guess as just a quick follow-up to that, because you did mention customers. Okay, you're seeing fewer of them in the dealership, but you're saying they're well behaved. What have your interactions with customers been like, and is it different now to before the lockdown?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no doubt about it. People are used to social distancing, and I think we've made sure, as I mentioned earlier, we have made sure it's absolutely priority that we make sure that the whole sales experience is pleasurable. Going to a supermarket is not pleasurable. It's okay to say we've all learned lots of lessons about social distancing, going through those sort of experiences, but when you are spending money at the level that we're asking for, then you've got to make it a pleasant experience, and you can do that with the maintaining social distancing without. So I think, I think customers need to be put at ease. We've done that, and we've made, and I think that's been a key part of the success that we've had.
So, there's obviously going to be some learnings, but thinking ahead, you've obviously great start since the restriction lifted, and some of those figures are impressive, and I very much you hope that those figures were the same every single month of the year with them kind of overhead absorption levels and volume levels. But what's your view on one, the pent up demand as you're seeing it at the minute, versus what we are, potentially that new norm of demand, and how sort of Q3 and July and the remainder of 2020 may look. Putting aside risk of lockdowns and things like this, but what's your view on the length that the pent up demand will last, and sort of the remainder of the quarter, really?
Yeah, certainly some of the success we've had, particularly on the trade side, we wouldn't plan for. I think certainly at this moment in time, a good as always, and it's all back to basics, isn't it? But certainly ensuring you've got a good website presence and making the customers' experiences as straightforward as possible. But you have to look to increase your conversion rates. We have seen a 20% increase in our overall leads. Obviously, more of those coming through online. But at the moment, I think yes, we will have a bit of a roller coaster. We've got to keep those expenses under tight control because there will be some lean months ahead. I think, as I've alluded to, I think the workshops have been busy, but, we have sold a lot of cars. Volvo sales have increased, year on year. So I don't particularly see that we should be worried too much from an after-sales point of view. From a sales perspective, we have got stock. I think certainly so, and we have got a reasonably good order take for September. So at the moment, if a customer wants a fresh factory order, it has to be September anyway. But there is quite a bit of stock in the network. So we're blessed in terms of having not always just the right car, but I'm sure between ourselves and Volvo, we'll find a way to get those cars to market. But I'm not sure if I can. I'm quite confident. People do want cars. And as we mentioned earlier, Volvo is possibly one of the right cars at the right time. I think what we are seeing definitely is more. Customers. Everything seems to be coming forward a little bit, if that's the best way of putting it. Customers aren't talking more about electrification and about hybrid, but there is still a lot of talk, and then the end of the transaction still is a petrol or even a diesel, whilst they still last at the moment. So somehow we've got to get that product a little bit more affordable. But we have Volvo's in a good place in terms of those products coming. So I'm having been in the darkest place in April. Not getting carried away with June too much, but I'm positive about the market maybe does it. I've probably mentioned to you before, but perhaps sometimes you just have to have your own share.
Yeah, I'm going to say, for your perspective, looking at Volvo as a brand and the expectations and market share of Volvo in the UK, their sort of brand strategy, and then what your market share is of that brand within your territory market share, then that might be slightly different than some of the other operators with a bigger footprint and operating under different brands, of where their view of the market going ahead could be totally different, because we know certainly that Volvo's strategies compared to other OEM strategies are slightly different at the minute, aren't they? So I suppose it is for yourself, it's maybe a different answer than many others may give at this current time.
Now, Clive, last week, as though you didn't have enough on your hands, you launched the Voice of Volvo chat rooms. Can you just explain to listeners what it is and what prompted you to do it, and also what sort of response have you had so far?
Yeah, I have to say that very, very good response, and I think we've looked at this. There's so many different sort of media channels, aren't there? And I think I think I mentioned earlier in our chat that we are the Volvo experts, and we put a lot of certainly from a personal point of view, a lot of investment into every one of our staff being fully trained at the highest competence levels, and and a lot of my team, they're committed to the company, but they're very much committed to the brand as well, and there's a lot happening. So I think it was born out of an idea in a recent marketing meeting that I think we're also guilty of putting too many of our communications are about offers, and of course it's our job to tell the local our local community where to buy a Volvo, but there's so much more, and customers want to hear so much more about other aspects. Yeah. That. Watch this space. I think some of this this recording may end up on there as well. I think I'm proud. A few years ago, I remember a customer coming into the showroom and asking a service advisor about a particular issue, and the service advisor said, I'll talk to Volvo, and I could see the look on the customer's face thinking, well, you are Volvo.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think yes, absolutely, there's a lot to talk about. I think that's and certainly there is going to be over the coming months, so that could be down to what we're doing or what's happening at the factories, etc. But yeah, it's certainly had a good response so far, anyway.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I think, like you say, it's what the customers want, really, and because you are the face of Volvo. to that customer. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's saying voice, not face.
Sorry, voice. Sorry, yes, it is a chat. The face-to-face is the service advisor that went off to talk to Volvo to get an answer for the customer. But yeah, so I mean, just finally, final question for you, really, in terms of plans for your business, and it's an odd question to be asking when you just you've got to the end of June, you've got out of the dark days of April and moved through May, and at the minute maybe it's a month by month or week by week basis, but you've kind of hinted on LinkedIn about a possible third site that may be still on the cards, and what could you sort of share your thoughts on that? And also, would you ever consider adding another franchise? I mean, bear in mind, our earlier conversation about, your Volvo through and through, since the days on the spanners. What are your plans for the future for Clive Brook Volvo?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. I love to see people get on, and I've sort of mentioned it earlier in terms of my staff. I'm incredibly proud of the team that I've got, and certainly I have no intention of hanging my boots up in the near future. So certainly I think there's a team of people around me that want to see the business grow. However, you're absolutely right. The dark days of April certainly make you realise that when you look at the losses that can incur, even aside of the government support, we need some more months, more years, let's say, of strengthening the balance sheet. I think is the critical thing before we grow again. And we want to invest with Volvo. So, I mean, I wouldn't say never, because I think there's a lot changing, isn't there, in terms of different products coming to market, and if you look even within the Volvo stable, there's a lot of exciting things happening. So at the moment, to answer your question, it is very much, it is. We are back in a bit of a survival mode. I think that's the whole probably strategy at this moment in time. And let's get through 2020. So I probably haven't answered your question exactly.
Sounds like a political answer, but yeah, I suppose the answer is you never say never, because you don't know, do you? At the end of the day, if something presents itself at the right time, then what, you're in business to do things.
Yeah, we love selling cars. We love selling cars. We love selling cars. We love that the buzz. I think yes, there will be changes in the industry that I think sometimes people forget. How much fun it can be, and where the buzz actually comes from. But yes, certainly at this moment in time, it is survival. But fantastic product, fantastic team, and we've had a bloody good start in June.
No, I mean it's been a pleasure, and as I said right at the start, it's been a long time getting you on the podcast, and for me it's been a pleasure to get you on, and the tough times that you've been through, and I think the passion is there, obviously, in terms of that you're with a good brand. You obviously you got that relationship with the brand, and I think that sort of strategy and growth with the brand, they don't always align, but I think at the minute they're in a bad place, and I think it's great that you are actually getting some benefit from that pent up demand, and long may it last as long as it can at the minute, I think. So just from me personally, Clive, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me. I won't leave it as long next time.
Well, Clive, I join Philip in thank you there. Many thanks for joining us and sharing your experiences and observations at this important time for car dealers around the UK. So we do wish you and the team all the best for the future. And yes, we will have you back at some stage, so you can count on that. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for now. You've been listening to this special Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Please like and share on social media, as it's important during these times for the dealer community to work together and share experiences and best practices. Many thanks to you for listening and supporting the podcast. Philip and I will be back with the industry headlines on Saturday, but do watch out for more special podcast interviews as we work our way through this crisis. Until next time, stay safe and stay well.